Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on biocides active substances in Euclid and R4BP3. My name is Heidi Rasakari and I will be your host today. The aim of today's session is to help you understand what is changing for active substance applications, why it matters, and what you can do now to prepare your dossiers in a structured and complete way. Today, we will cover why data management is becoming increasingly important for biocides and why Euclid is the basis for organizing this data. A key topic for renewal applicants is that from the 1st of July 2026, Euclid renewal dossiers must include the approval data reported in the dossier. This is an important change, so we will explain what it means and how applicants should prepare. You will also hear about relevant improvements to the Euclid format and how the validation assistant can help you identify missing or inconsistent information before submission. And finally, we will show you how Euclid rules are checked when you submit your dossier through R4BP3 and what happens if business rules are not met. There will also be time for questions, so please do use the Q&A throughout the event. So yes, join the Q&A through slido.com and use the event code shown on the slide. We encourage you to submit questions while the presentations are ongoing. If your question is for a specific speaker, please mention the speaker's name when you submit your question. This will help us direct the question to the right person during the Q&A. Selected experts will focus on questions that are within the scope of today's webinar, and out-of-scope questions will be redirected to the help desk. If we're unable to answer your question live today, please check the published Q&A after the event. For questions after the webinar, you can also contact ECHA through our contact form on the website. As usual, all of today's webinar material will be available on ECHA's webinar page, which will soon be published after the event. The published Q&A will include answers to the questions we received today, including those that we may not have had time to cover live. So if your question is not answered during the webinar, please check the published Q&A afterwards. You can find all the material at echa.europa.eu/webinars. Today's content will start with Jochen Mattes giving an outlook on biocides IT developments. His presentation will explain why it is important to organize your data in Euclid format already now. Clara Rueda will then present the improvements in active substance application Euclid dossiers, including relevant changes in Euclid version 10. After that, Ioana Vladescu will introduce the Euclid validation assistant for biocides, explaining the key elements of the validation assistant and showing how some of the biocide checks work in practice. Andres Moreno Garcia will then detail R4BP3, including how to submit your Euclid dossier, how dossiers are checked against the relevant business rules, and what happens if those checks are not passed. Towards the end of the program, I will then come back for the conclusions and to introduce the Q&A. So thank you for your attention so far, and with that, we are ready to move into the first presentation. Thank you, Jochen.
Thank you, Heidi, for the introduction to this webinar. I am Jochen Mattes from the Biocides Unit, Active Substance in ECHA. Indeed, with this webinar, we want to raise the need and requirement agreed at the CA meeting as early as 2023 that the data from the approval must be reported in IUCLID format at the renewal of the active substance. As data, we mean the studies, the study summaries, including the results reported in the right fields in the IUCLID format. As IUCLID is a tool used worldwide for the collection of chemicals data, many applicants will have their data organized in IUCLID format already now, and we see that many of you submitted those on a voluntary basis with their renewal dossiers. Once the studies are organized within the tool, the transfer from one legislation to the other is facilitated by changing the working context. Once the working context is chosen, the change of the data is automatic. In addition, are many endpoints assessments in the same way for several legislations. With the agreement of the CA in 2023, we implemented validation rules for all active substance application types under the Biocidal Products Regulation. And now, with this introduction, I would like to go to the first part of the webinar entitled Outlook for the Biocides IT Organized Data in IUCLID. I will first elaborate on the why we can expect more and more data required to be submitted via IUCLID, and that more of the current quality rules within the future be transferred to mandatory rules that are automatically checked upon submission of your dossiers. I will then describe the background on the validation assistant developments and the quality rules. The quality rules are already now necessary to be fulfilled upon submission of your dossier. The mandatory requirements which have been until now agreed will be described in the third section, and I will close with the submission alignment between the submission tool R4BP3 and the IUCLID dossier tool. So first, why there will be an increase of use of IUCLID. One part is that today, data is the core business of many organizations, and so it is for ECHA as well. The need to have data findable, accessible, interoperational is essential for the use of the data. Therefore, ECHA added this into its strategy published in 2024. You can download the ECHA strategy in the link here below on the slide. ECHA also emphasizes the data management in its recent reorganization. The Directorate Data Services and also the Directorate Digital Systems and Technology are the relevant ones. Two of our speakers will be from this directorate. Clara is in the unit entitled Incoming Data and Data Management, and Joanna is in the unit Data Completeness and Dissemination. And of course, the reason for increased IUCLID usage is the regulation as well. The Biocidal Products Regulation sets out that the agency is required to check the format of submissions. Also is laid down that the IT tool IUCLID is specifically mentioned to be used by applicants and by member states. So the increasing use of data transmitted in IUCLID is that we need your data in uniform and structured format. We need your support to provide all the data in IUCLID. We need your help to renewal applicants to find the required studies in case the renewal applicant is not the same as the approval. And we need to consider that substance assessment is a continuous process. More and more data will be used, and of course it's much easier to consider it when it's in a structured way and can be automatically searched through. Because for the future use, we expect to implement the automatic assessment report generation. And here, I would like to mention also the webinar that is to take place on the CASA platform to support you in the automatic generation of risk assessment under REACH and biocides legislation. The webinar is to take place on the 2nd of June. Once the automatic dissemination has been implemented, will the function be available to preview the dissemination from your IUCLID dossier as well. And this will support the future requirements for the Common Data Platform on Chemicals also. I will now go to the validation assistant developments. Our aim is to have as much data available in IUCLID as possible. And our way to do this is by collaboration. As early as 2023, the competent authorities agreed that ECHA should develop validation rules for the active substance approved IUCLID dossiers to improve the data availability in the foreseen format. You can download this agreement via the QR code at the bottom of this slide. The validation assistant you may have discovered already is launched by clicking on the right-hand side of your Euclid dataset or dossier. It is marked here on the slide with a red square on the right-hand side. The checks are being run and the outcome will be the validation assistant report. My colleague Joanna will describe in more detail what information you can find in the validation assistant report. In this agreement with the competent authorities of 2023, it was stated that the Euclid dossier for renewal applications should report data of the approval in the Euclid format as well. So starting, as said already in the beginning, from 1st of July 2026, at the latest, the correct reporting of the approval data and studies must be provided. With this, we also started to implement the validation assistant mandatory rules. As before, with the aim to have all data in Euclid format, we did endorsement together with the member states. The document was endorsed in the Biocides Competent Authority meeting in February this year, 2026. The mandatory rules endorsed for now are very basic checks that many of the applications fulfill already now. It is the active substance identification with its requirement of EC, CAS number, molecular formula, structure, etc. in the reference substance. For the submission of active substance and active substance renewal applications, only the product type applied for can be in the Euclid dossier. The manufacturer source will be required, unless it is an in situ active substance. When read across or waiving it is marked, then a justification will needed to be provided. And for each data requirement of the core data of Annex 2 to the BPR, at least one key study, weight of evidence, letter of access, or waiving must be provided. As agreed in the document in relation to the timelines of mandatory rules implementation, we have implemented the first 2 points, so only the reference substance and the product type requirement implemented in the current version of Euclid. The other mandatory points endorsed will be in the new release of Euclid expected in October 2026. Now I come to the section to choose the application purpose. In order for the Euclid tool and submission tool R4BP3 to work together, it is important that you choose in the Euclid dossier the purpose, the case type for which you want to make an application in R4BP3. So if you intend to send a new application for an active substance to ECHA, you need to choose as purpose of the application in the Euclid dossier approval of an active substance for use in biocidal products. And then you choose in R4BP3 with the submission the application type, application for approval of active substance. You see more of this requirement in the following presentations. I hope that with this presentation I could raise your interest. You find support in the biocide submission manuals that you can download from the ECHA website. There's the biocide submission manual, How to Prepare a Biocide Dossier, and another manual with the title, How to Use R4BP3. Should you require direct contact support, we ask you to contact the ECHA helpdesk that is available under echa.europa.eu/contact. The take-home message from my presentation are for applicants of renewals of active substances. Make sure to prepare your full Euclid dossier to have it ready to submit or resubmit, best already now, but at the latest starting from 1st July 2026. Before submitting your dossier, use the validation assistant, passing all the rules. Make sure that no submission rule is failing, and make sure that most of the quality rules checks are passing as well to ensure to have a good level of data reporting in the dossier. After submission via R4BP3, check your messages from R4BP3 whether the dossier passed the submission or whether additional contextual rules need to be fulfilled. With this, I thank you very much for your attention and for your support of safe use of biocidal active substances in Europe. I hand now over to my colleague Clara, who will describe the improvements that have been implemented in the biocides active substance Euclid dossier. Have a good continuation of the webinar, and I'm looking forward to your questions already now via Slido. Thank you.
Thank you, Jochen. Hello, my name is Clara Rueda, and I'm part of the Euclid team here in ECA. Today, I will present you the main Euclid format improvements that has been recently released and that are relevant for those of you that need to prepare a biocide active substance application Euclid dossier. Before going to the specific improvement changes, I would like to share with you how the Euclid changes are managed and how the Euclid release plan looks like. Euclid follow an annual release cycle, which include one major release with format changes. Usually it's in April. This year it took place at the end of April, and the version of Euclid that has been released is Euclid 6 version 10. The format changes includes, for example, the inclusion of a new field to record new data or changes on a list of values that can be selected. During this cycle, we also have a service release in October, which does not contain format changes, and that is reserved for changes to functionalities and configuration, for example, the activation of new validation rules or the implementation of translations. It is of a high importance that the format changes are done only once a year because we know of the high impact of those on those of you that are preparing the data and using the data, because you need to do some adaptations. Regarding the Euclid format organization, Euclid format is divided in two main parts. On the left side, you can see the Euclid format that is harmonized at OECD level. These are documents that can be used to prepare submissions across different jurisdictions in the OECD. This format captures information complying with the reporting requirements of the OECD test guidelines, as well as other national and international methods used for chemical studies. In the preparation of biocides active substance dossier, the scientific data is recorded in this type of harmonized formats. Changes on these documents need to be agreed at OECD level. On the right part of the screen, you can see the so-called format extension or specific formats and are used to fulfill requirements for specifically regulatory context. In this case, Euclid is customized to prepare submissions for legislations such as biocidal or plant protection products. More details on all the format changes and specifically on those related to the harmonized documents are available on the Euclid 6 major release webinar video. In this slide you can see the link, but you can also search for it on the ECA website. After this short introduction, let's start taking a look on the main format changes relevant to the biocide active substance applications. Version 10 includes an update on the dossier header of the working context BPR active substance application representative product. With this change, the purpose of application field has been updated to ensure that the pick list values are now aligned with the case types available in R4BP3. It is very important the selection of the appropriate purpose of application, as it enables the corresponding validation rule set to be triggered in the Euclid Validation Assistant. My colleague Joanna will give you more detail on this topic later today. It is also important to note that the selection of the correct value in the purpose of application field in Euclid and the corresponding case type in R4BP3 is key for the successful submission. Regarding the identification of the substance, as you may know, ECA makes available a functionality to support you to record a substance in your dossier by selecting a predefined reference substance from the ECA BPR active substance database. This is a list of substances that contain all approved active substances as well as the active substances for which an application exists, and the substance identity validation step is completed in R4BP3. In version 10, this functionality is now available for all the BPR working context where this scenario can be expected. Version 10 has also an important improvement in the use document. This change supports the applicant to report within a single use record the outcome of the exposure assessment for multiple scenarios for both human health and environment. Those different scenarios, for example, could aim to cover different tasks like mixing or application or different exposure groups. This improvement streamlined and simplified the recording of this data that in the past required the creation of different use records. The new version includes information on the environment that in the previous version was missing, as well as a new field to report the risk characterization ratio for both human health and environment. IUCLID 6 version 10 also includes an improvement to support the applicant in preparing the dataset. The IUCLID user interface displays dynamically the minimum set of required key fields to be able to describe a use. In this case, each time that a new use is created, the applicant should provide as a minimum the product type, the use name, the field of use, and the type of user. Remember that for each product type, you can create one or more documents to record information related to its different uses. As you know, as part of the implementation of the format changes, we also develop migration rules to ensure compatibility across different IUCLID versions. In this slide, I would like to explain you how the migration works for this specific use document. The slide, in one hand, we can see that the first set of fields, like a product type, use name, and field of use, don't change across versions. On the lower part of the screen, we can see that the information from each repeatable set under version 9 is migrated to a new repeatable set for a human health scenario. For example, if a dossier is created in IUCLID 6 version 9, and it includes one estimated oral uptake value and one estimated dermal uptake value, when this dossier is migrated to IUCLID 6 version 10, the system will create 2 new scenario blocks per each reported value, as it will not know if both data are related with the same scenario. Finally, related with the use document, let's take a look on the environmental part. In this slide, you can see the specific fields to report the outcome of the exposure assessment related to environmental scenarios. In this area, I would like to mention that IUCLID supports users in selecting the appropriate unit depending on the value and the protection target selected, by highlighting the relevant units that can be selected. For example, in this slide, you can see that the value predicted environmental concentration for the protection target freshwater should be reported only using one of the units highlighted in dark gray on the screen. The final improvement that I would like to share with you is the creation of a new document under the working context BPR microorganism substance entity. This document aims to gather information on the culture collection where the microorganism is deposited. This request has been implemented in agreement with the Plant Protection Products Regulation to ensure alignment on how the same data is collected among regulations. And with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and now I pass the floor to my colleague Joanna, which will present you the IUCLID Validation Assistant target for biocides. Thanks.
Thank you, Clara. Hello, I am Ioana Vlădescu, and I work in the data validation team in ECHA. I am responsible for the development of the Validation Assistant solution for biocides. Today, I'm going to cover a short introduction to the role and scope of the Validation Assistant, how to read the Validation Assistant report and understand its key elements, and the demonstration of 2 biocidal validation checks and how to fix the related errors. First of all, let's start with a short introduction to the IUCLID Validation Assistant. It is one of the IUCLID modules that helps users ensure their substance or mixture datasets or dossiers are complete and consistent before submission to authorities. Its main purpose is to identify errors and omissions, such as missing mandatory fields or inconsistent data, improve data quality and reduce the risk of dossier rejection, and save time by catching potential issues early in the preparation process. The Validation Assistant is based on a specific working context such as BPR Active Substance Application Representative Product, which we are covering today. It automatically checks IUCLID data against predefined validation rules. Please note that for each Validation Assistant working context and relevant submission parameters, a different set of check applies. After running the validation, the results are displayed in the report under the Submission Checks and Quality Checks tabs. Any failures that are reported under the Submission Checks must be corrected for a successful submission. If these failures are not corrected before you submit your dossier, your submission will not be accepted by ECHA. The quality warnings issued under the Quality Checks flag common inconsistencies and shortcomings in your data. Quality warnings will not prevent you from successfully submitting your dossier to ECHA. However, not correcting them may lead to later clarification requests, and you are advised to address them as far as possible. Let's now look at how to read the Validation Assistant report and how to interpret the failures. The first thing to check is the location of the issue in the dataset or dossier. The report clearly identifies the document, section number, and section name where the error occurs. The second important element is the message itself, which describes the issue and provides brief guidance on how it can be resolved. Finally, the report displays the rule ID associated with each failure. This ID is unique for each check and should always be included when contacting the help desk, as it allows the issue to be quickly identified and investigated. Let's now move on to the practical part of the presentation. I will demonstrate two validation rules related to the biocidal product type. I have already created a dataset for a Renewal BPR active substance application. The first example is a business rule that ensures exactly one product type is provided in the active substance dataset. In section 7.1 of IUCLID, I created a document called Use001 and added two product types, PT01 Human Hygiene and PT03 Veterinary Hygiene. After saving the document, I ran the validation. You can validate the completeness of the information entered at any stage of the dossier preparation and as many times as needed. To do this, simply click the Validate button in the top right corner. In the Validation Assistant report, we focus on the Submission Checks tab, where business rule failures are displayed. We can see that business rule BPR016 fails for section 7.1, where the U001 document was created. By clicking on the highlighted document name, you are redirected to the relevant document in the sliding window. The error message is also displayed at the top, providing details about the issue. To correct the error, only one product type must be saved in the document, so I will remove PT01. After making the correction, remember to save the changes. We can then revalidate the updated information in case of dataset directly from the report by using the button in the top right corner. The error is no longer present in the Submission Checks tab. For the next example, we look at the quality check that ensures the same product type is identified across all intended use section documents created in the active substance dataset. For this case, I created two documents in section 7.1, Use001 with product type PT01 Human Hygiene, and Use002 with product type PT03 Veterinary Hygiene. After running the validation, we focus on the Quality Checks tab in the Validation Assistant report, Several quality checks might fail, but we will focus on quality BPR 041, which relates to section 7.1. To fix this issue, return to the dataset and ensure that the same product type is specified in both documents. Other information provided in the use document might be different, but the product type must be identical across all documents. After saving the corrections, click the Validate button again. The quality check error will no longer appear. Please ensure that all issues identified in the Validation Assistant report are addressed, as they clearly indicate missing or inconsistent data in the dataset or dossier. Know that some quality checks may be transformed into business rules in the future IUCLID releases. In conclusion, the IUCLID Validation Assistant is a key tool for ensuring the completeness and consistency of biocidal dossiers before submission. It provides an essential first line of verification, helping users identify issues early and ensuring dossiers meet submission requirements before authority evaluation. Thank you for your attention. Now I pass the floor to my colleague Andres.
Hello, I'm Andres Moreno Garcia. I'm the product manager of R4BP3. Today, I will be presenting the changes we have done in R4BP3 to adapt to the improvements done on the IUCLID side. My colleagues have already presented the improvements to the data collected in IUCLID for active substances and the new business rules implemented in the IUCLID Validation Assistant. So with that, we can move to the main points of the presentation. Until now, R4BP3 has applied its own logic to check the format of submitted dossiers. With this release, this logic is now complemented by the IUCLID Validation Assistant. When a dossier is submitted, R4BP3 will automatically run the IUCLID Validation Assistant in the background and report the same errors that users can already see in IUCLID. This also means that any new business rules added in IUCLID will then automatically apply to submissions made through R4BP3. Joanna has already explained the new IUCLID business rule, so I will not go into detail here. I would just like to highlight that the current set of rules is only the first step. Additional rules are already planned for the October IUCLID release. Clara has also introduced the purpose of application field in IUCLID, which is particularly important for BPR submissions. In this field, users must select the option that corresponds to the case type they will later choose in R4BP3. If the value in IUCLID does not match the selected case type in R4BP3, the submission will not be accepted, and a new dossier will need to be resubmitted with the correct value. The behavior of R4BP3 in case of validation failure remains unchanged. If a submission does not pass the checks, R4BP3 will create a new task requesting the applicant to submit the dossier within a specified time frame, clearly indicating the rules that have failed. Let's now look at how this works in practice. The new application dialog and the upload dossier step in R4BP3 remain unchanged. In this example, we select renewal of active substance and upload a dossier. In this scenario, the dossier contains an incorrect purpose of application. We have selected approval of an active substance for use in biocidal products, but the correct value should be renewal of an active substance for use in biocidal product. After creating the case and submitting the dossier with the incorrect purpose of application, a new task appears in the task list for the applicant, resubmit information. The event is also recorded in this event history panel with link to the created task. If we open the task, we can see that the submission fails rule SC22. The purpose of application in IUCLID does not match the selected application type in R4BP3. This task, therefore, requests resubmissions of a corrected dossier. Let's now look at the second example, where a dossier fails IUCLID business rules. If we run the IUCLID Validation Assistant, we see that the dossier fails two business rules, applicants are strongly advised to correct such issues before submission. However, if a dossier is submitted with failing rules, R4BP3 will, as before, request resubmission and indicate which rules have failed. As you can see, the error messages are consistent between IUCLID and R4BP3. IUCLID, however, provides more detailed guidance to help resolve the issues. Once the issues are corrected and the IUCLID validation shows zero validation, zero failing rules, the case may proceed to the next step, the manual business rules check carried out by ECHA. It is important to note that the IUCLID Validation Assistant does not cover contextual business rules. These checks remain specific to R4BP3. For example, verifying that the active substance in the dossier matches the one selected in the submission wizard. So, passing all the business rules in IUCLID does not mean that your dossier will pass all the automatic format checks done by R4BP3. To conclude, there are 3 takeaways. Validate your dossier in IUCLID before submission. Carefully review submission messages in R4BP3. And, in case of doubt, consult the updated submission manuals or contact the ECHA help desk if needed. Thank you.
So thank you to all our presenters. From the presentations today, one could conclude that structured data in IUCLID is becoming increasingly important for biocides active substance applications. It supports better data management, helps applicants prepare more complete dossiers, and enables authorities to process and assess the information more efficiently. There are 4 main take-home messages from today. First, make sure that your study summaries are reported in IUCLID format. The aim is to have the relevant biocides data available in a uniform and structured format so that it can be used more effectively throughout the regulatory process. Second, use the IUCLID Validation Assistant before submission. It can help you identify business rule failures and quality issues in your dossier, including where the issue is located and what needs to be corrected. Third, after submitting through R4BP3, check the messages you receive carefully. R4BP3 will check submitted dossiers against the relevant IUCLID business rules, and if a dossier does not pass, it will indicate which rules failed and request resubmission. And finally, on renewal applications for active substances, please be ready for the change from 1st of July 2026. From that date, renewal dossiers must include the approval data reported in the dossier in IUCLID format. If you need support, consult the submission manuals on ECHA's website or contact the ECHA help desk. So the presentations have come to an end, but you can continue to submit your questions until 1 o'clock Helsinki time through Slido. Where applicable, please address your questions to the relevant speaker. A polite reminder that only questions related to today's webinar can be addressed today. Any unanswered questions will be covered in the published Q&A available soon after the event. For questions after the webinar, you can also contact ECHA through the contact form on our website. Thank you for joining us today, and goodbye from Helsinki.